Anyway, on the line now, we are joined by Robert O'Connor. Anyone who listens to D15 today regularly will know Robert O'Connor. We've had him on quite a few times, and he's here today to speak to us about his new EP, Severance. Good morning, Robert. Welcome to the show.
Good morning. I'm back again, like clockwork. After 3 months, I just magically appear.
You just have the standing Robert O'Connor slot, just waiting every 3 months.
Selling my wares again. Anyway. Yeah, all good. Busy. My head has been spinning the last kind of 6 weeks. I took a little holiday in July and I can't remember anything since then. It's just been kind of hectic with the single straight into the EP and remixes and videos and just kind of hectic, really, in a good way.
And you're coming off before this as well, a pretty successful EP with your last one as well, aren't you? I'm
trying to keep the ball rolling, really, because I haven't really taken a break since 2018. I've tried to be pretty consistent because I think kind of consistency is the number one thing, especially when you're independent. When you want to kind of keep a certain level of familiarity, not just with your followers, but with the bloggers and radio and Spotify as well. They kind of have an unspoken thing of, let's have you release something every, they'd like you to release every couple of weeks, but it's not feasible. So you have to do the next best thing. And for me, that's every kind of couple of months. Usually I'm sort of every 3 months, but the actual campaign of a single can run for sort of 5 or 6 weeks by the time you do. For me, I always add in a little bit of a remix bundle and the video, and I try to kind of give it a bit of a lifespan.
Absolutely. I think it's kind of the world we live in now in terms of media. It's everyone wants to be kind of hit with things regularly and just you want consistent content. You're not really getting, whether that's music or even if you look at other online platforms, people who do TikTok stuff and people who do YouTube stuff, whereas it used to be, you try to get as many clicks on something as you could possibly get. Now it seems to be volume. It's all about volume. It's getting as much content out as possible to try to kind of bombard people a little bit. Is there a balance there you have to hit, though, between you want to get stuff out regularly, you want to keep kind of bringing stuff out, but you obviously don't want to just be kind of arbitrary about it and go, right, oh God, it's been X amount of time, I need to release more stuff.
Yeah.
Is it hard to strike that balance?
I think there has to be a plan. So, I said I didn't take a break, but the first 4 months of this year, I wasn't releasing. I was working on something else, but I was recording music in the background and I knew my plan for the year. So I think planning ahead is the main thing. And like you said, with the likes of TikTok and all those sort of apps, it's very much you have to keep active. I used to sort of black out between singles on socials to give myself that break. Whereas now that's definitely not a thing anymore. You've got to stay in people's faces, even if it's completely irrelevant posts. And what you'll find actually is you do a lot of your growing on social media in between singles because people are kind of relating to you on a more personal level or getting to know you on a more personal level. And that's something that they often miss out on during a single or an EP or an album campaign because you're kind of hitting them with almost advertising for, that 4 to 6 week period, which you can kind of get a negative response to sometimes, not sort of in terms of them writing bad things, but just, you notice sometimes numbers falling off if you overly bombard. And just looking at a lot of social media statistics, it seems to be a case that you kind of have to let posts breathe a little bit because let's say, for instance, I released a music video yesterday and then I had a couple of other things to announce as well. But you have that consciousness of, well, the video is going to get less hype if I then announce a show or, that sort of way. So you have to sort of have a content calendar and you have to have some level of quality control as well, whereby you're not just releasing stuff for the sake of it, which is why I don't sort of, set myself this goal of I'm going to release a single every month because for me, the actual campaign of one single takes longer than a month. So it's like the first Friday is the single and then I might do 2 remixes and then the next week I might do a video. So I've kind of got a month of Fridays mapped out. And in the meantime, I'm behind the scenes trying to get as much coverage as possible. So if I was to do that every month, I'd just never stop. There wouldn't be any creative process because I'd constantly be in sort of admin promo mode.
Yeah, and there's obviously the thing as well of you want to kind of find that balance of, I mean, you sort of touched on it yourself there, like having people kind of remember you're there, remember you exist kind of a thing.
Yeah.
But at the same time, you don't want it to be a case where you're, oh God, he's posting again.
No,
like
absolutely
it has
not.
to be that balance of, Like, you're just staying in someone's head. It's nearly better to be that little thing that you're constantly in the back of someone's head than that you're constantly in their face and it gets annoying.
Yeah, and if you can get a single to kind of fly on its own a little bit, like with this latest single I've released, I think the previous one that I released set this up on a good platform. And it's kind of, the other single was still sort of had a heartbeat while I was releasing this one. So that was amazing because I had, I'd finished promo, but it was still surviving on its own kind of merit, and it was being passed around organically, and you could see that the numbers just weren't dropping off a cliff the minute you stopped promoting. So that's always really encouraging because it means people are listening, and sharing, and putting it on playlists. And I get playlist alerts, so I was kind of waking up every morning the last few weeks, and it's been like between 4 and 7 playlists kind of every day, which is incredible when that's totally unsponsored. It's totally organic content,
Yeah, absolutely. No, do you notice, because we're talking obviously about releasing the singles and releasing EPs and kind of hitting that kind of stride of getting the timing right on it and everything. I know I've noticed it myself as more of a listener and someone who's very passionate about music on that end, that albums are kind of nearly going away a little bit, and it's people are releasing EPs, they're releasing singles, they're doing all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Have you noticed that yourself, and do you think it's a symptom maybe of the fact that you can't just release an album and then, like it used to be, where you'd release an album and you'd tour that album for a year, maybe 2 years, and you might release 3 singles over that time from that album? That kind of, am I right? Would I be right in saying, or do you think
you would?
That can't really happen now?
Yeah, I think it's really unfortunate. I think if you're a huge artist, like if you're a Coldplay or an Adele or an act of that caliber, you can still go and have albums to like add to your legacy, and I think that's amazing. But I think if you're, I don't even want to say up and coming, because the vast majority of artists never reach that sort of level, and success means, such a different thing than it did even 5 or 10 years ago. You can be a niche artist and still be successful, but 100% agree with you on the album front. I mean, for me, this would have been an album. This is like, I don't know, an 8-track EP, right? So it's quite a long EP, but there's an intro and an outro in there. It's kind of built up. They're not all full songs. So there's probably 5 or 6 full songs on there. And this would have been an album had I not been so conscious of the age we live in and the time we live in, because I would have kept on recording and probably released this in sort of January or February as a 10 or 11 track album. But there is an awareness of time, and there's also, I think, with EPs you can kind of keep it all killer, no filler. So with this EP, by the time I'm done with this, right now there's 4 singles lifted off it. By the time January comes around, all 5 kind of main songs will have been singles. So there's no kind of bonus tracks on there that are just on there for the sake of it. So, in my opinion, it's allowed me to have stronger quality control than if it was an album I might have chucked 3 songs on there that didn't feel kind of quite right or up to par. I do, like, for a long time I missed the kind of album format, but by the same token, it's so expensive to record music and to get everyone on board that you need to make it all happen. And then if you go and do a show, you're going to put some money into that as well, or multiple shows. So you'd come out the other side kind of nearly bankrupting yourself if it wasn't a massive success, because streaming, the money just isn't there with the streaming. So unless you're selling a physical product like a CD or a vinyl, you're really not going to see the money come back. So you have to sort of, like for me, for instance, I do a couple of other things, and I've started to do some endorsements, which it's mad. That could mean creating 1 or 2 videos for a company, and you'd make more money than you would from a whole release.
That's crazy.
But it allows you to inject the money back into your passion project.
Yeah, and that's it, I suppose. At the end of the day, it's about doing things that you kind of maybe not so much that you don't want to do. I mean, I'm sure they're still enjoyable to do.
Yeah, still try and keep it on brand.
Yeah, that's it. But you're kind of doing things that aren't the passion in order to fund the passion.
Yeah. And I think that's the case with big major artists as well. I mean, I don't think that everyone who's a judge on The Voice or any of these shows necessarily that's their first choice. Maybe some of them it is, but I reckon a weekly paycheck is still very beneficial, or whatever way they're paid is it's certain and it's set in stone. Whereas with streaming and now with touring, it's so expensive to go out on tour. I was reading the other day about how to even have the trucks to go on tour, the price has increased like threefold, and for even these major label artists now, it's becoming a real struggle.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I remember hearing, this would have been, I suppose, years before this maybe became as much of a thing, but I remember hearing Jared Leto, who a lot of people now would know more as an actor than a musician. But I mean, he was speaking in an interview saying that during the kind of early part of his acting career, once that started to work, he was kind of acting so he could afford to take risks with the band and have 30 Seconds to Mars be a thing. And they became a really big band, and then the band could sustain itself. But in the early days, he just wanted to continue acting, to put the money into the music, because that's what he really wanted to do. And so even back a few years ago, people were doing that kind of thing. But
that totally makes sense.
See, you know,
yeah,
it's interesting to see that now people have to do it. I suppose, like, more people have to do it.
I think if you want to be active and continuing to release on a regular basis the way that I am at the moment, you do, because otherwise it would require taking breaks and then going getting maybe another job to pay for it. So if you can kind of juggle a little bit and, you know, be doing other things in the background while in the foreground the music has been released and you're promoting it, if you can do that and find the energy to do that, I think that's the best way, so that you're not having long gaps in between.
Yeah, absolutely. So in terms of this now, am I right in saying this is now 8 consecutive top 5 hits you've had in the LGBT music charts?
That's right. Yeah, I think it's 8. I think it's 8. So it would be. I think actually it's 9 now with this one, because this one went in at number 3 a couple of weeks ago, and it's been floating around the top 5 the last. I think today the next chart is announced, and that would be 4 weeks if it stays in today. So I think the thing with the LGBT community is there's a sense of loyalty there. So once that kind of community discovers an artist or taps into what an artist is doing, and they like it, they stick by it and watch it grow. And even if that act has then had mainstream success and fallen from that pedestal, there still seems to be quite a lot of loyalty there with the community. So I think you can see that with certain kind of LGBT or LGBT friendly artists. They have a lot of longevity, even if it's only at a certain level. It just resonated, and more kind of nostalgic 80s and 90s music. It just resonated with them.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's great finding that kind of, finding a voice in that community as well, because I think one of the things that is so important, and it gets kind of overlooked, I think, when in the grander scheme of all this kind of media and music kind of stuff, is just how important that representation really is. So having a community there that will kind of get behind you, because I mean it's almost like a give and take type of thing. Like, you're getting that support and that loyalty and that know, that backing, but then as a community they're getting that representation out in the kind of wider scene as well. These sort of trance club era sort of vibe to some of the stuff. And then there is very much a kind of a modern synth pop sort of thing that you kind of have going on there as well, like the kind of more modern take on it as well.
Yeah.
Would you have a particular way of describing your style, or do you prefer that it's just eclectic and there's no one real explanation for what it is?
Yeah, it's a tough one. I don't have the elevator pitch. It's like solid. I think it's like solid pop melodies at the core, and it's kind of, you know, pop for grown-ups in a way. I feel like it's well made pop. It's not, you know, it's not throwaway. I think hopefully these songs will stand up, and, you know, in a couple of years and stand the test of time. And with the last EP, it was definitely as you say, kind of modern EDM sort of. Because the guy that I worked with on that Skynum GT was an EDM producer, and so that, you know, that kind of balanced out. I brought a little bit of my kind of more new disco vibe to it, and he brought the EDM side of things, and we even kind of explored more sort of tropical territories. It was definitely a modern sounding production. With this one, it was consciously. We started out with the trance sound on the first single, and there's another track on there that's very trance oriented as well. And that was a conscious thing. We had lots of references. I brought many songs to the table, just to pull out, you know, I love that sort of synth, I love that percussion, that sort of thing. And that's how I would say I co-produce. I don't physically hands-on produce, but I would be very much like, I know every keyboard line, every synth line, every, you know, percussion that's in the mix, because I've usually chosen them or approved them. But yeah, I think it's a tough one to put an actual label on. It's definitely pop now. I would say electro pop. There's a bit of high energy in there from the 80s. And I find with remixes I explore even further. So the remixes for this recent single, I've tapped in very consciously to two different genres. One was with a guy called Sakra, who has become quite big on YouTube, and he makes these remixes sound as if they were made by like Stock Aitken Waterman. So
Yeah.
they're really consciously like that sort of 1980, late 1980s vibe. And then Garrett Shortland, who produced the original, he made a really like full on hardcore trance mix, which kind of sounds like a bit like Fragma or something like that from, you know, the year
Yeah.
2000. So I think I'm like exploring different territories with the remixes, and then you're getting a more commercial, slightly more modern sound with the radio edits.
And I think it's a cool kind of step back a little bit in terms of kind of going a little bit old school in terms of the remixes. Because I remember, I'm old enough to remember that you'd go and you'd buy a single, and when you used to buy a single, and on that there was usually have a B-side or whatever, but a lot of people would also have a remix of whatever the track that they were putting out was, and that
Exactly.
was kind of a thing at one point,
like your
and
CD1, CD2 kind of thing, you know, and you would pay a fiver and you would get your 4 tracks. And if you look at my Spotify now or my Bandcamp, that's kind of what I'm mimicking. So I'll have the single come out, and then I'll have a bunch of remixes, and I'll put the instrumentals on there for people who enjoy listen to, you know, instrumentals. And that's inspired by that period of time when I bought every single going in the 90s, you know?
Yeah. Absolutely, and I that's what struck me straight away because I've noticed it a few times over the last while when we'd be speaking to you, and I keep an eye on your social media and stuff and what you put out.
Brilliant.
And that you do the like, you know, the remixes of these tracks, and straight away it just hit me as kind of it's a very 90s thing, and I really like it.
It definitely is. Yeah, I think it fits with the whole aesthetic. Like in some ways, like I read one review last Friday there when I was on my way to do a video, and I was kind of catching up on bits of press that had come up for the EP. And I read one review that said, God, what was the line? But it basically said I had found my sound with this record. And I do kind of believe in a way that's true. And I wouldn't dismiss anything that I've done in the past. I still stand over that. But I definitely think by the time I got to the end of the last EP, I felt like if I did any more of that, it would be watering it down. And, you know, you can only do so many EDM tracks with a drop or whatever it is before it just becomes very predictable and you know, this sort of Kygo-esque sound that everyone jumped on, and you just then want to get off that bandwagon and find kind of your own. So in a way I went back to my own musical roots, what I grew up listening to, and luckily Garrett Shortland, who is the producer, I was introduced to through a friend. And the funny thing is, the two of us have never ever met. We work exclusively online. He's in the UK. So it's the strangest thing. We speak every single day and have done for a couple of years, but we've never met face to face. But we have this working relationship and in a way friendship as well. But I do kind of feel like with this EP, I've found my actual sound, and it feels maybe like it's less of a fleeting thing than with the previous records. I think I could explore this sound further, and you know, I find myself songwriting even while I'm promoting right now, whereas normally I would stop. So I think I'm just responding to this kind of sonic palette. Like I'm really enjoying exploring it.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm going to let you go because I'm conscious of the time here, but just one last question I want to ask.
Absolutely.
We're going to play. We're going to play One Way Ticket, and I've seen a quote from yourself talking about that song, and you called it the song you've always wanted to write. What did you mean by that?
What I meant basically was I always wanted to write this really like thumping pop song that had kind of every element that makes, you know, these songs that you hear that are just completely joyous, even though they might have like back in the sort of 80s you would hear like an ABBA song that would have a melancholy lyric, but you know, it would make you feel really good and it would make you want to dance, and it just kind of elevates your soul a little bit. And I've always wanted to write a song like that, that sort of bittersweet, wistful feeling to it. And actually what happened was I had 3 or 4 songs that were in line to be a single on this EP to kind of lead it off, and none of them were quite hitting the mark for one reason or another. And then we put this together in one day. I literally wrote it on a bus journey, 2 bus journeys I wrote it on, and I knew as soon as I wrote it, this is the one. And I just felt like I'd kind of hit that jackpot of this is the song I've been waiting for. And I don't even know where it really came from. It was one of those kind of pop miracles.
Yeah, absolutely. Brilliant. Well, that sounds absolutely fantastic. Robert O'Connor, thanks very much for joining us today.
Great to
on
chat
the
with
show.
you.
It was lovely talking to you as always, and I'm 100% sure we'll hear from you again.
Oh, you definitely will.
When we do.
I'm sure I'll be back in January.
Yeah, absolutely, and I look forward to talking to you again. So, as I said, we're going to play the track here from the new EP, Severance. If you want to introduce it yourself there, actually.
Yeah, so this is my brand new single, One Way Ticket, and it's out right now.
Thanks very much.